Once, Auezkhan Kodar sent me a personal message on Facebook. I can't say we knew each other very well back then. However, I knew him well, of course. After all, he was a famous poet, writer, and scientist who wrote some very interesting works. And whenever we would meet, I would always respectfully shake his hand. Biknur Kisikov, writer, author of numerous novels, stories, and poems, member of jury of literature contest, inspirer and organizer of Kityap Fest festival. But whether he knew me, that was a big question. I mean, I was just a friend on his long friend list on Facebook. And then there he was, texting me. He wanted to share something with me and some other people. So he wrote to me with the news about the release of the Threshold of No Return book. He wanted to share his success with his subscribers. I have to confess, back then I barely flipped through its pages as I was extremely busy. But now, after some time, I decided to get back to this book. Not just get back to it, but also to tell you about this novel. Before I start talking about the book, I would like to say a few words about its author. Since his very childhood, he suffered from a serious disease, but did not lose his fortitude and became one of the brightest intellectuals of his time. Auezkhan had a multi-layered personality and his talents were almost limitless. He was a bilingual writer and there is such a rare gift in this profession. And of course he was involved in translation work too. He was also a culturologist and wrote excellent articles about Turkic mythology. In his works, he paid special attention to the image of Korkyt, because Auezkhan Kodar was born where, according to legend, the iconic kobyzshi once lived. The representative of the so-called New Kazakhstani Wave, writer Auezkhan Kodar, was born in 1958 in the Kyzyl region. As a child, he was seriously ill with polio, which did not prevent him from graduating from high school with distinction. As a poet and critic, he began to publish in 1985, and in 1988 became a member of the USSR Writers' Union. He was the founder and editor-in-chief of Tamir, the only philosophical magazine in Kazakhstan. He penned a number of books and poetry collections such as Circles of Oblivion, Call of Being, Threshold of No Return, and the Anthology of Kazakh Poetry in the translations of Auezkhan Kodar. Another thing Auezkhan was involved with was literary mentorship. He published a magazine, helped young talents, and in every way contributed to the development of literature in Kazakhstan. In general, literary mentors of the 90s were very special people. They did not have the support of the state that they once had under the Soviet Union, and they never had that inclination for commerce that began to appear in people a little bit later. And here I would like to mention Olga Markova, another literary mentor, somewhat of a legend, if I may say that. She founded the literary and artistic publication entitled Apollinarius in 1993, and for many years she headed the Musaget Foundation, which gave way to many Kazakhstani writers and books. Now, returning back to Auezkhan, I would still like to emphasize what was his main interest. It was writing. And now I would like to tell you about the very book that appeared on my personal page on Facebook in January 2015. I often divide books into those that can be skimmed through and those that require mindful reading. So this story cannot be read quickly, as it is filled with deep meanings and an abundance of interesting events. The protagonist of the book is a man called Aghzam Aghzamov. He's a former deputy and quite a big shot, endowed with influence and power, the man who encompasses the very essence of the big shot word. So one day this man wakes up in some place which is not his home and finds out that his appearance has changed completely. a high, Socratic forehead turned into an ugly Winnie-the-Pooh bald patch. His magnificent nose with a patrician hump was red as after a week of binge drinking. His sensual lips adorned with an intricate pattern were twitching. His beautiful oval chin, that suddenly became square, trembled, and for some reason his cheeks were covered by gray stubble, which stuck out in the most unattractive way. The most cruel caricature could not possibly offend Agzamov more than this new reality. And this is how his ordeals begin. The personal driver does not recognize him and does not let him into his car. The secretary does not recognize him too and kicks him out of the office. As it turns out, his flat is now inhabited by some stranger who hands Agzamov over to the police. This is how Agzamov finds himself in a prison where he shares his cell with a strange giant who is busy translating Beatles songs into Kazakh, and a mysterious person who only reads books and talks about the culture of the 20th century. Without thinking twice, together they bribe the guards and set themselves free. But the adventures do not end there, as Agzamov finds himself at a meeting of the mystical cult of Ahura Mazda, where he encounters many famous citizens of the city. For example, he meets a well-known healer, the owner of the Naiman auto dealership, and then he runs into the owner of the Utya company. And a little further away from him sits the nephew of the mayor, a well-known big shot. And here, Agzamov's attention is drawn to a book that he wrote just recently. Trying to get the book, he provokes the bookseller's aggression, who then immediately summons several thugs. They take him to a weird mob boss. Later, they take him downstairs where they rob him of his possessions. And there he meets an unexpected savior who helps him out of this situation. The events in the book change so rapidly, as if you are watching an action VHS movie of the 90s. And at times you find it hard to follow the plot of the story. By the way, the author of the pulp fiction, Tarantino, is also present in this book. At some point, he even threatens the main character. The writer deliberately vulgarized the plot, trying to put all the absurdity that was happening in the 90s on display. And in the background, philosophical thoughts of Baudrillard and Kierkegaard can be recognized in this novel. And there are a lot of different thoughts in this book. Reasoning about the decline of morality and spirituality, thoughts about faith and atheism, reflections on capitalism and communism. The novel speaks a lot about modern intellectual trends of the West, including postmodernism, of course. One can notice that the author is no stranger to this trend, and his novel, in a sense, can be called postmodern. After all, postmodernism is not a quotation per se. It is more of an overcoming of binary oppositions and cultivating what is acquired in the marginalized reality, meaning that it is something that exists outside of public recognition, something that still exists, fully fledged. In this book, everything is perceived as one stream, the high and the low, the general and the particular, the national and the supranational. And here none of this is given preference. All of the above is subjected to some critical consideration, which borders on cynicism, one might say. The author perceives our society as lying and demoralized, and then lying turns into politics, which is a disease that must be treated with surgery. Bedik Jilkibayev, PhD, writer. The author is sometimes so cynical that he harshly makes fun of not only famous people of that time, but also of the classics of literature. And that is what makes the images in this book look really convoluted and grotesque. In this novel, a reader will find a perplexed artist, an adventurous courtesan, a mobster, and even some kind of a mystical substance, such a freak show from the 90s. And it is not surprising that in one of the scenes of this convoluted plot, Agzamov also meets the prototype of the author himself. He was a picturesque guy, broad-shouldered, broad-cheeked, with a square Dravidian chin and wide eyebrows. Only his eyes were narrow and looked out from under the glasses very attentively, probingly, and at times even aggressively and unkindly. But all in all, he was a good-natured man, and one would get easily attracted to him because of his laughter. The booming, rumbling laughter, as one visiting Russian writer once put it, the laughter of a Hollywood movie star. When laughing, he would throw back his raven black hair, and it would scatter over his shoulders, making him look like an American Indian. He was so colorful. There was so much health in him that somehow one would fail to notice that he was walking on crutches, dragging his small, paralytic legs. This new Agzamov is neither a boss nor a big shot anymore. He is a hobo, a homeless man without a home and a name. Now he looks at the city not through the windows of his luxury car, but through the eyes of a vagabond. And it is with deep regret he witnesses how the city is turning into a huge bazaar. The first stories of the building are flashing with big plaques written in a monstrous mixture of Kazakh, English, and Russian. But most of all, he is sad about the city becoming infested with casinos and slot machines. It was the time of Ponzi schemes and scammers, MMM and vouchers. And it was then that confused people, in an attempt to somehow improve their hopeless situation, clung to every single opportunity in order to survive. This mood of the invisible masses of people insulted Agzamov, who was always accustomed to relying on his intellect and his influence in society. After all, the mechanism of fame is the most mysterious thing in the world. Once having bothered to earn authority the rest of his life, he believed he could rest on his laurels. He thought his fame would work for him better than any producer. But now, who was he? The former Agzamov? And Agzamov was amazed that he thought of himself in the past tense. Although Agzamov was thrown out of his past life, he is still alive, and most importantly, his mind is still there. And that is what he is thinking. Agzamov liked the SUV, which was parked by the casino because it reminded him of his own car, which so unexpectedly and irrevocably disappeared from his life. But was it gone for real? Or maybe he could try to get it back. And then Agzamov, quite unexpectedly, decided to go inside the casino and try his luck. The main idea of my novel is that we are too frivolous about time. We do not understand that now, after all, time has become higher than space, that time has become the dominant principle in human culture, and that it is becoming denser. That all processes occur much faster, and if existing at such a very fast and dynamic period, you fail to realize that you need to change, that you still need to somehow correspond to the spirit of the times. As Nietzsche wrote, then a tragedy from the spirit of music may happen. It was in the 90s that modernity was forged, the modernity which in no way can lead us to some understandable landmark. And in the finale, the author calls it a great confusion. And it is not a comment about the writing, but about that period in time, where everything and everyone were so confused. So why did the author initiate all this? It seems to me that the answer is love. And as the author himself said, when there is no love, the world plunges into the cold of hatred, a cosmic cold, where it is not creatures that reign, but utensils. All this alienates the Creator from His creations. After all, I am too redeemed only by the warmth of your love. With these words, the author ends his story. A great writer, culturologist, and simply an extraordinary and significant personality, Auezkhan Kodar will remain in our memory as a book creator who loved his creations. And through them, he loved the entire world.